Hey, friend, welcome back to the Grace Filled Grit podcast. Oh, my goodness, we have a treat for you today. My friend Ginny Yurich from the viral 1000 Hours Outside platform is here with us today. We all know and love her, and we appreciate her wisdom on raising up the next generation. She is always filled with facts and sharing practical tips that we can implement in our families to have happy, healthy children. Her message is kind of a return to yesteryear with generations of kids where they played outside, unsupervised, and without structure. Welcome, Ginny. I am so thrilled to have you back on the show. It's been a while. I'm so glad to have you.
Lana, it's been a really fun journey together. We've had all sorts of conversations. It's so cool to go from like not really knowing someone at all, and then within the course of a short span of time, being like, oh, like we're really connected, and we've had these, I think, deep conversations. I've just so thoroughly enjoyed your books, just the beauty of them, but the content too. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this is fun. This has been a fun ride. We've gotten to know each other. We both have been putting out a couple books at the same time, and our messages line up, although we go about it a different way. I just love your work, and you're just so much fun. You have a beautiful family. So most of my friends here online know all about you. They're already following you, but just in case someone has snuck through and they're new to listening, introduce yourself and tell them a little bit about yourself and then your platform and kind of your mission.
hmm Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. My name is Ginny. Isn't it weird to introduce yourself like over a voice thing? You're like, I have no
It
idea who's
is.
listening. My
It
name is
is.
Ginny, and I just really I introduce myself as a mom, which is isn't that an interesting thing? Like, how do you introduce yourself? Do you use your career? Do you use where you live from? But that's kind of how I introduce myself as a mom. We are a homeschooling family, and we have 5 kids that are now 15 down to age 7. So this is a really sweet spot in these mothering years, and I can see it slipping away actually, Lana, because like the
Mhm.
oldest one is about ready to drive like within the next year. So I'm starting to see that little bit of a breakaway. So we're like hanging on with some thin threads by this last little bit of this stage of life. But I my story really is that I always had wanted to be a mom, and I was excited to be a mom, but then I was a terrible mom, and I just it's like it hit me with like a brick. I just was
Mhm.
not expecting how hard it would be. Obviously, I expected it would be challenging, but just like the lack of sleep and the lack of knowledge and the amount of responsibility, the lack of successes, I guess. I don't know if that's even the right way to put it, but like,
Mhm.
you grow up and you get accolades and you get gold stars and you get report cards and you get degrees and you get pats on the back. And then all of a sudden you're like, you have a baby that's vomiting on your shirt. And like, this is your life now every day through the night, all the time. So my story is just that I was in a very dark place of being a mom because I wanted to love it but didn't. And my whole life changed in one day, on one September day in 2011, when, at the suggestion of a friend, we went to a park for 4 hours. That's like such a simple story, but I really had no idea, no concept that spending time, an extended time with children outside was even a thing, let alone that it was a thing that would be so impactful on their development and also on my mental health and well-being.
Mhm.
So this has been a journey of me for the last 12 years of having a goal of being
Mhm.
outside. That is a simple concept. It is not easy to achieve in terms of busyness, in terms of different stages of life with kids, but the premise of it is a simple premise. And what it has done is it has laid this beautiful foundation for learning for our kids, because kids benefit as a whole child, like
Mhm.
physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually, more cognitively, all
Mhm.
these things. When we let them play freely outside, we don't have to be coercive about it. We don't have to direct it. They just play. And then they have this self directed mechanism inside of them that leads to learning. And so it helps the parent too. And then all along the way, you're building memories. So the platform started in my failure. And really for many years, when I started to write about how this expansive time in nature had changed our lives, like most people were like, that's a really silly idea. No, thank you. But
Mhm.
eventually it caught on. Like a couple people did it, they tried it. It is one of those things that is so simple in its premise, and yet it really has the power to change your life if you're just kind of paying attention to how much are we getting out? How much are we getting our kids out and making a priority and celebrating it in a
Mhm.
world that is really steeped in technology?
Mhm. That is so good. So good. And now through all that, you're helping families. What I love about your platform is it is so practical. Like you mentioned, it's easy to do, but you're helping these families through your podcast, through your books. You're an author of a couple of books. We'll talk about your new one coming out. It's beautiful. And you are changing lives, and not just the people our age and the moms and the grandmas, but you're changing the next generation because they're going to learn how to relearn how to do these things that we did as we were growing up. So I just love it. I
Mhm.
love it. I love it. Well, as I mentioned, you have a new book. It's called Until the Streetlights Come On. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see a picture of it here. It's absolutely beautiful. It's not out yet. It's for pre-order. It's coming out. Is it mid-November? Is that
Mhm.
right? Do I have that right?
Yep,
Okay.
right in the middle. Yeah.
So, thank you so much for reading. I have been reading this, and I'm so glad you sent it to me. And it's just a good one. So, what I love is about your honesty. I mean, just now as you're chatting and you're talking about how you felt like a failure, um, and moms struggle, and you just shared it all kind of raw. And I want to thank you for that, first of all. But at the beginning of your book, you wrote about feeling like a failure. And I'm going to go ahead. Are you okay with me reading a couple of
Yeah.
phrases from
Hmm.
it? Because it's
Yeah.
really, really good. So, out of that time where you were just really struggling and feeling like a failure, you say, but after slothing through 3 years of parenthood, I happened upon a secret, an answer, hope. Throughout the persistent and often rapid changes in child development, this secret miraculously continues to work more than a decade after our family started using it. The answer covers many of the modern parenting problems we face, from exhaustion to anxiety to depression to relentless pressure to overwhelm to fear to screen usage to the deep desire we have to connect with our families. It provides so many of those things that we're looking for right now. And they can all be found in one place, in one word called play. So that is just so profound. So speak on play, because that's just not where we normally go when we talk about honing in on our parenting skills. And as new moms, the word play just doesn't come up very often. So speak to that a little bit.
I think that we give ourselves too much credit. Can
Mm-hmm.
I say it that way?
Oh
I
yeah.
certainly did. And because we're older and we've been around, I mean, you're 2 decades plus older than your kids. Maybe you're 1.5 decades older than your kids, depending on if you have kids, whatever age. But we're older, and these babies come and they don't seem to know anything, and they can only do these instinctual things, and they're nursing or they're drinking from a bottle. And so it's like we take on this role of directing everything. But if you really take a step back and observe, what's actually happening is that the baby is driving on their own development. So we don't go up to the baby and say, okay, kick your right leg over and this is how you roll. And then we don't say, okay, I'm going to put you up on all fours. And if you move your right hand with your left leg, you're going to learn how to crawl. Like we don't do any of that. And when we observe, we see that babies who can't speak, who don't know what day it is, who don't seem to really know anything, they learn for mastery. They do know that. They know how to
Mhm.
learn a skill and then progress on to something that's harder. And so what happens, I think, is that so often, and maybe this has been where we've gotten off track in the past several decades, is that we start formal schooling so young that we sort of forget. We forget that a 3-year-old has the capacity of the infant to still learn for mastery and then to try something harder. And so, what's happening when kids are playing is they are self directing their own learning, which is
Mhm.
hugely valuable. I would say that the smartest person on earth could not construct a course of instruction for an infant better than the one that the infant constructs for
Mhm.
themselves out of their own mind. And so this is a big piece of what we've lost. The play is what allows kids to learn how to learn and so much more than that. Obviously, it helps them to learn about themselves. It helps them to learn social skills. And I just read this amazing book called Indistractable by Nir Eyal. I hope I pronounced his last name right. But he was talking about how in our psyche, like everybody needs autonomy and they need to feel confident, competent, and they need to have a sense of relatedness. And he said if we don't have those three components, then we're going to really struggle. We're going to be in despair. We're going to be looking at other things, scrolling on our phone. He said, booze and news. I mean, that was, we're going to self-soothe with these different mechanisms because we don't have these elements of our psyche met. So it's like, well, when you think about competency, relatedness, and freedom or autonomy, that's what kids get when they play. And that is
Mhm.
what they are completely missing in this day and age because we have a well intentioned pursuit of things that are opposite of that. We have a well
Mhm.
intentioned pursuit of an incredible amount of structure because there
Mhm.
are so many good opportunities out there. And there's a lot of fear around parenting and kind of shoving things and programs into all the blank spaces of the calendar.
That's so good. That's so good. So, going right along with that, let's hit on screens and technology. The big topic. As kiddos are getting older, it's even more difficult. The older they get, I feel like a lot of parents are struggling with how to find that balance with the technology, and it is not easy for them. What have you learned through the years about your kids being on and off screens? Like, what is the state of the union with kiddos nowadays? I mean, not politically, obviously, but they're our most valued treasure. Yeah, we don't want to go to politics, but speak to the technology piece. And maybe if you have some practical tips for parents that are struggling with that. I mean, like I said, it goes with all ages. I mean, it used to, as my kiddos were coming up, there really wasn't any. And then they come up and in their middle school, high school years. But nowadays, you see the baby getting handed an iPad pretty often in a restaurant or something. So speak to the technology piece a little bit.
Okay, the technology piece is a tricky one, right?
Mhm.
Because what it does is it seems to solve a problem instantaneously, which is I need some peace and quiet, or I need to get some work done, or my blood pressure is through the roof and I need a break. And also, this kid is whining, and so problem solved. But what's happened, and we can see it in society, is that when that is overused, and I think in moderation, it's pretty clear that it's not that big of a deal. But when it is overused, it's robbing kids of time that they need for development. And maybe it's robbing all of us, right? Like
Mhm.
parenting is a great opportunity for learning patience and a great opportunity for learning to be resourceful. And I think that's part of the journey is that we come up against these really hard situations and we have to try and figure it out. And so I I had this really impactful conversation with this young man who's 20 years old and his name's Sean Killingsworth, and he started this movement called the Reconnect movement. He's trying to get these college students to get together without their phones. And he laid out a very grim story of how he felt like he didn't really get a childhood, not because his parents didn't love him and he didn't have a good mom, but because as a society, we have not curbed the screen usage. So he said, my mom wanted me to play outside and my mom, sent me to this after school program where there's supposed to be all these kids to play with. And he said everyone was on a screen.
Mm.
Even at the age of 8, he said he would go to this program and there'd be Legos and toys and all sorts of things. And he was so excited to play. And he said, but no one else was playing. Every other kid was on a Game Boy. So he said,
Mhm.
I lost that opportunity to play. And my midwife has said, that someday our kids are going to come back to us and say, why didn't you limit it?
Mm.
Why? And that's what this child was saying. He's not a child anymore. He's 20, but he's saying that, and the problem is that the solution doesn't lie within one family. Normally, it's like you could take your family and figure out your problems. But the problem is it's a cultural thing. If no other kids are playing, and I had an experience with our daughter when she was in the 4th grade, and she played on a local rec basketball team. So I guess she would have been 10, and they had picture day. They go in for their pictures, and then you're there early, so you have a half hour to wait until your basketball game. And every other girl on her basketball team in the 4th grade had a phone, and she
Mhm.
didn't have one. And they were all doing I would assume TikTok dances because they were watching something and then they were dancing together in like, these synchronized ways and laughing. And oh, Lana, I cried
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because I mean, I'm like, I can't go really swoop in. Like, what are you supposed to do? But she
Right.
just stood on the outskirts, like so uncomfortable. And I'm like, those years are already hard enough. Like,
Right.
feeling like, are you going to fit in or not fit in? And oh, it was really hard to watch, but I think, that's part of the conversation. Part of the conversation is the thought toward long term and what might our kids look back on and say, like, that they didn't have any chance to be themselves because they're being recorded all the time because
Hmm.
everybody has a phone. So there's a
Right.
little bit of motivation there in terms of how we can affect our whole culture, our whole society. Like I talked to this guy one time. He runs this thing called the Moab Adventure Center. His name's Brandon Lake, and they run all these really cool trips in Utah. And actually, they run cool like river trips all over the country. But we happened to do this river trip in Utah, and it's down the Green River. It's 5 days. You're on this raft, and I went with our oldest daughter, and you have no cell phone signal. So this is like a throwback to yesteryear. Like your phone doesn't
Hmm.
work at all.
Right.
There's never a point in time when your phone works. And so you put it away. You don't ever have it out. So for 5 days, I didn't touch my phone. It's packed away. And it was just like a throwback to a
Hmm.
different time where you can really be present. And so this Brandon was saying that they take that premise on all of their family trips. His kids are older, maybe they're late teens, they're early 20s. And he says, look, if we're going to pay for you to come, we're going to treat it like the river trip. No one brings their phone. You're going to be
That's
present.
so, so good. Oh my
Isn't that
goodness.
cool? But what I
Yes.
thought about was really neat was that that starts to permeate because then those 20 somethings have to tell their friends, you're not going to hear from me for 6 days.
Hmm.
And that starts to become a thing that's normal. So I think if we can look at screen usage not just as the tricky part is it's a trade-off, right? Like we only have a certain amount of time. Childhood
Hmm.
only lasts a certain amount of time. So okay, we're going to give some of it to screens, all right, but we just can't give as much as we're giving. So
Hmm.
we're looking at the trade-off, but we're also looking at how is our family impacting the greater culture. And so I kind of look at it as like if my kid doesn't have a phone, that's a playmate for another kid.
Right. Right. Oh, that's good. That's good. So, what are the stat? Because you're always so good with stats, and I'm just kind of throwing this in here. But what's the current? I know before last time we talked, there was a number of screen time versus outside time on what
Mhm.
the average kid. Is there a new number there? What?
I don't know. The only number I know, and it sticks because it matches up, is like this 4 to 7 minutes of outside time free playing and 4 to 7 hours on screen. So really, this is just it's alluding to a huge imbalance for our kids. And you asked about specific ways. That was like a broad thing. I think I brought up the broad thing though because you have to have resolve.
Oh
You got to have
yes,
resolve. You got to
yes.
really stand strong. This is not easy. It comes up every single day. I mean, our kids, the youngest one, as she gets upset, she's asking to watch a cartoon, and the oldest one wants to text friends, and the middle one's on a text thread with these people he met at this conference. I mean, it's constantly like that. It's constantly coming up. So, we have our resolve. I think it's a tall order for parents. It,
Hmm.
it really rests, it used to rest on society to a degree. And I think that's partially why it's so hard. It used
Hmm.
to rest on society because the cartoons turned off. I think you and I talked about that. It's like there were
Hmm.
already built-in boundaries and now they're not. So the
Hmm.
parent is the one that has to create all the boundaries and also hold them. It is worth it. It is
Hmm.
hard, but I think one reason why it's also worth it is because it gives you a better life too. So our strategy, our main strategy is to fill our lives with what we want to fill it with so there just isn't quite as much time left over for screens. So in
Hmm.
our house
That's so good.
it might look like we bought a cross stitch project. It might look we've got beads and string and we're making friends bracelets. It might look like, hey, can you help me make dinner? It might look like we're going to the park for a couple hours and I know you don't really want to because our kids, I think most people's bent is to stay inside where it's comfortable and there's no
Hmm.
bugs and the temperature is regulated, but we're going to go do that. And so when we live that way, it gives us a good life too.
Oh
And I think
yes.
that it seems like a pain Like I wish the TV wasn't available all the time. Like I
Mhm.
wish that cartoons shut off at noon on Saturday and there was literally no more television available for the rest of the weekend. But it's not that way. And so since it's a tall order, I do think that there is a tall reward.
I agree. I agree with that. And when you said it's a constant, I mean, I even this weekend we had I have some adult kids. I have one still in the house here. We had a big family dinner to watch the Chiefs. Go Chiefs! And I was getting irritated. So there, I have grown adults sitting here, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be that. You're a grown, successful adult, and I'm like, put your phone down. Put your phone down. Why are
Mm,
you on your phone? So it's even like it. We did that, and it was like no phones at the kitchen table. We
mm,
did all that for those years, but it's a constant because it seeps back in, and then we have the next.
yeah.
We have grandbabies now, and I'm like, okay, so it is. You just
Okay,
have you
that's
can.
such an interesting topic of conversation though, Lana. And I mean, that's what you can speak to is like, I mean, we're in this spot. That's probably even more of a question. Like we're in this spot where I have a bit of control. Like I
Yeah,
can say, put that thing away, or you can't have that right now, or I'm gonna hide it, or whatever it is. When you have grown adults and
I
you want them
know.
to come over, right? Like you want them to come over. So it's like these ideas that are like, well, everyone put their phone in a basket.
Yeah,
Like
it
probably
sounds
that's not
silly.
gonna fly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And you don't have a whole lot of control. And I go back to my husband's mom, my mother-in-law is amazing. And she used to say, I mean, as she, all of her, she's got a gazillion grandkids, and as they'd come in, put your phones over there, put your phones over there, put
Mm,
your phones over there. And so I do think if you kind of set some expectations, but it is an ebb and flow. You're constantly
yeah.
kind of loosening the rein, and then you're out of control, and then it's none of your business anymore. And so it is definitely a constant for sure.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
why, when we talk about the sunlight, like my
Mm,
kiddos, they were very, very active athletes, loved being outside as much as possible here, on the small farm, in their sports, fishing, hanging out in the treehouse, all the things. But there were days when they were in high school with 2-a-day practices with their athletics, and it was in the middle of winter, and their sports were not outside, like track season's over. So now they're in a stinky gym and doing wrestling meets or whatever. And they would leave in the morning before school practice in the dark and not get home till after dark. And I know that just right now, that just makes me cringe to think about so much structure. So, I'm I'm being a little
yeah.
authentic, exposing all our flaws here at the center house. But you talk about the need for sunlight and how important it is. So, why is it good for our bodies to be exposed to that sunlight?
Hmm. What a interesting thing to bring up. This is something I've thought about often. I used to teach high school, and there was a job opening I remember for being a like an assistant swim coach, which I am like I'm
Mhm.
not good at sports, but I was like on a swim team for like 5 minutes when I was a kid. So I was like, oh, you make a little extra money. I was like, oh, maybe I'll be the assistant swim coach. So I went and I like looked at the job application, and Lana, it was like practice at 5:30 in the morning, and I was like, no, pass.
Heck no. Heck
And it was
no.
also after school too, and then there were meets, and it was just so all-consuming. It's definitely a topic that's worth discussing is youth sports culture is, what and just youth culture in general. Like, what is the expense here? Like, what
Right.
um this is a
Yeah.
big deal. Like exposure to sunlight is a normal biological need. And so if we're filling childhood with so much seat work and so much, it's like, well, maybe the swim practice should be like during part of the school day instead
Right. Right.
of being
Yeah.
before and after all of the bookend. So that's a totally different topic of conversation, but adults deal with the same thing. I think you hear a lot of adults say, I go to work before the sun comes up. As an adult, though, at least you have maybe a little bit more freedom and autonomy to say, at 9 a.m., I'm going to step outside and take a call in the fresh air for 10 or 15 minutes.
Right.
And
Right.
maybe teachers should do that too, right? Maybe it's like, hey, listen, if you're listening and you're a teacher and in your 9 o'clock class, like, would you take them out for a short walk?
Right.
Because what happens is the sunlight is a resetter. The
Mhm.
sunlight resets over 100 body systems that are dependent on the day and night cycle. Our bodies are really in tune to that. And so things obviously changed when electricity came along and all of a sudden there's light bulbs, and then that starts to change and mess with your internal rhythm. But what happens is when you see that sunlight, it goes through your eyes to your brain, but it has to be bright enough. So indoor light is not bright enough. You can actually
Mm.
measure light. You can get a light meter, maybe even on your phone, but we actually have one. It looks like a little Ghostbuster tool, and it's got this like curly thing, and then it measures the amount of lumens or
Okay.
lux, which is like the amount of candles. Like how many candles is like 10,000 candles worth of light.
Ah,
And so
interesting.
it's really interesting. So inside you're getting maybe 500, 800, but when you step outside, even on a cloudy day, that light meter is jumping to like 5,000, 8,000, sunny day 10,000, 12,000, 16,000. And so your brain needs to register a certain amount of light in order to like shut off the sleepy hormone and pump out the good hormone. It pumps out serotonin
Mm-hmm.
when that happens in the morning, and serotonin eventually turns back into melatonin. So you know those days like when you're out all day and you're just like that good kind of tired at night where you can't even really keep your eyes open and you fall right asleep. It's like that's what's happening. That's what the light is doing. And so some people would say like one of the best things that you could do, depending on the season, I guess, and what time school starts. But one of the best things that you could do for your overall health is to walk to school or ride your bike, because you're
Mm-hmm.
getting a little bit, you don't need a ton, 10 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
15 minutes of morning movement and morning light. And then every day you're resetting your body according to nature, according to those rhythms.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so important. And I know you're a strong woman of faith, and that's not your whole platform, but we've had a lot of conversations, and just watching how God, like, he created the same thing. Like, I watch it with our chickens. If it's dead winter, they stop laying, and it
Yeah.
is purely 100% the amount of light they get depends on how many eggs they produce. And it's, our bodies are not much different than that. His systems are
Yeah.
just so fascinating and
Yes,
interesting.
they are. I mean, because when you people like, okay, when you really take a step back and you're like, you look at the intricacies of our world, to me, all of the they point to a creator. They
Right.
absolutely point to creative design. And so one of the things that I learned about was that when we talk about the spectrum of light, like nobody really thinks about these things. Fluorescent light is a spectrum. It's like a
Hmm.
wave, like a beautiful wave, like at the ocean, all of the different colors of light. Well, a fluorescent light is like peaking at just a couple colors. I'm so glad this is going on YouTube because I'm like, I can't see, right? It peaks at a couple, there's no wave. The
Hmm.
fluorescent light is no wave. And so when you go outside, you're experiencing that full spectrum of light. Well, throughout the day, the colors shift, and the
Hmm.
shift in color is a signal to our body.
Hmm.
What? So you
Yeah.
got that bright morning light that wakes you up. You got this like high sun. This is like sustaining you through the day. And then as the day winds down, the colors change. They
Hmm.
change to blues and purples. And that is meant to signal our bodies that the day is ending. It's time to slow down. It's time to rest. And all of these signal our bodies so that our body has a rhythm to it. And you see rhythms all throughout nature, and kids
Hmm.
live best when there's a little bit of rhythm. I mean, if you're talking about screens, I think one of the best solutions is to have a rhythm with it. To say,
Hmm.
you know what, where we set aside, we do Saturday mornings because it kind of reminds me of Saturday morning cartoons. Like,
There
so
you
we do
go.
Saturday mornings. You can do tech until 10:30. Whatever time you want to get up, you get up. At 10:30 it ends. If you want to play a video game, if you want to watch a movie, that sort of works. It's a rhythm. So
Hmm.
Kim John Payne has a really cool book called Simplicity Parenting, and he says rhythms are noticeable even to the youngest members of the family. Where rhythms exist, less parental verbiage is needed. You're not having to
Hmm.
harp on everybody all the time because
Right.
you have this rhythm. So nature has rhythms, and rhythms are really good for families too.
That's so good. That's so good. And I know that your family, so a lot of what your platform is based on is the 1,000 hours outside. And so you've helped families, and you have a lot of visuals and freebie. I'm assuming that you've got some freebies on your website. I
Everyone's
think
got freebies.
yeah, I think I've seen them on there, and yours are actually the prettiest ones around.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about What are the benefits for the parents getting the kiddos if they actually hit, like, this is a real number, 1,000 hours in a year? Doesn't matter if you're in Kansas City and you're under a foot of snow. You have systems. I've listened to them. It's pretty interesting how you do that. So what are the benefits for the parents, for the children, and what do you notice in your kids if they've been lacking outdoor time?
Mm. Ooh, well, I mean, that one you find in books. Like when
Mm-hmm.
they lack the outdoor time, and I'm not talking about like just for a couple days, but in perpetuity, that's where we're seeing a lot, not all, but a lot of the need for therapy services. And so a lot of the pediatric occupational therapists are talking about that. And they say there's a really big decline in the skills of children, the strength of children, the ability to deal with resilience and to be resilient and to deal with adversity and all of that. So that would be a long-term thing. I would say that there are benefits to parents and children if you spend 1,000 hours outside or if you spend 400 hours outside. I always say
Mm-hmm.
you don't fail. You don't fail
Mm-hmm.
here. You cannot fail. Going outside is a worthy use of your time. And the reason is because beyond the physical things like that, the light guides our body and our kids will have stronger bone structures because they have been jumping off of things and landing and having that impact, and their joints are more supple and they can stretch further and they have good risk assessment because they've been using their bodies in a variety of ways throughout their childhood. Beyond like those physical things, there's all sorts of cognitive benefits too. Like the brain structure is greatly affected by complex movement and by sensory input. It's like, oh, someone seemed to know what they were doing when they created a world filled with sensory input and put children in it. Because
Mm-hmm.
children are drawn to the things that help them to learn and grow. And so that's happening outside. I think a big thing is social. And that's what that Sean Killingsworth was talking about, is that kids are really lacking these authentic opportunities to socialize, and nature provides
Mm-hmm.
that with this abundance of materials that kids aren't fighting over. It's not go, I wanted the red truck. And it's like, well, no, everyone gets a fern. There's
Right.
enough ferns to go around,
Here's
all
an
right? Everybody,
acorn.
here's a goat. I mean,
There you go.
nature comes in abundance. And kids come at that and they have these interior resources deep down that allows them to play pretend and to, I mean, what a skill, Lana. Isn't
Mm-hmm.
that a skill? Like kids
Oh,
are
yes.
amazing. They're way better
Yes.
at pretending than I am and coming
Mm-hmm.
up with worlds. I remember being with my daughter. She was 2 years old and she had a little mango. And she was like, this is my baby. And now my baby's
Aw.
going to go to the library. And she just carried it around. I mean, that's wow. The
Yes.
capacity that kids have for imagination. And so, in environments with other kids, then they start to socialize and they learn the intricacies of that, of the push and pull of conversation, of
Mm-hmm.
how to be assertive but not too assertive. You don't want to be too bossy or your friend's going to quit and go crying and go home. You really
Mm-hmm.
want them to keep playing. And so, this nature is providing all of these opportunities. If we talk about the spiritual side, if this is like what someone's interested in, from a faith perspective, God has given us so many of his spiritual principles displayed in nature. So it's
Oh,
like,
yes.
okay, do you want to teach your kid about you are a new creature in Christ? The old is gone, the new has come. Well, then, like, hatch an egg.
Right.
It
Right.
only takes,
Absolutely.
right? It only takes 3 weeks. Like this was scrambled eggs, and now it's like this cute little fluffy chick. And it's so, I mean, what a picture of the old is
Yes.
gone, the new has
Yeah.
come. Same with the butterfly. And that's
Mm-hmm.
another really simple thing that we hatch monarchs, just a few
Mm-hmm.
every year in our home. They're easy to find, they're fun to hunt for, and they shed their last skin and it's like this beautiful
Mm-hmm.
gold and green chrysalis, and it's got this gold ring of dots. Like nobody even knows where that gold comes from. That's like a
Mm-hmm.
big thing I read about. And then all of a sudden it becomes a butterfly. Like who could have ever imagined that?
Yeah.
No
God's
one.
amazing. He is just amazing, isn't he?
Yes, and that's not going to be in any of your science fiction books. That there's this green and yellow thing that crawls on the ground, and now in same amount of time, a couple weeks, now it's a black and orange butterfly that tastes with its feet, and it's got a proboscis. I mean, what in the world? So,
Right.
and that's everywhere. Like if they say, consider the lilies of the field, they do not
Mm-hmm.
labor and spin, and yet not Solomon was arrayed as one of these. It's like, well, how can you consider the lilies of the field if you're on your iPad?
Right, right. That
You
is
can't.
so powerful. I mean, seriously, turn it off and go outside and just look around. And
Mhm.
it's making it happen. You're so right. You are so right.
Yeah, so the
So,
benefits are there. The benefits are there for the kid. The benefits to the parent are very similar. This is a place for you to unwind. It's a place for you to be present. It's a place for you to connect. It's a place to pull you away from your mess that's inside, just to give you a reprieve from that. Because when you're a parent or a grandparent, well, maybe, I don't know. My parents' house is always pretty clean now that they're grandparents, but you're like living in a fair amount of chaos. And so
yes.
this is an opportunity for you to step away from it for a little bit. So there is a lot. You're building relationships that and memories that last for a very long time. Even if it's just you that's remembering them, you get to
Hmm.
look back, and there's a lot of pleasure in looking back and thinking back on the things that you've done, the memories that you've made with your kids. And everyone says nobody remembers the television. I mean, even it's fun,
No.
like you get together for a sports game. We do the same thing. But I could, and some could, some people could, but like I certainly couldn't be like, remember that game back in, you
Oh,
know,
yeah, no.
1996? I mean,
No,
some
I
people could.
remember how good the chili and the cornbread was. I don't remember the game.
Right, or all your cute, oh my gosh, you make the coolest foods. We
Aw.
did, what did we do? We did this, the cake that looked like a flag, but it was like a cheesecake.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a good
Oh,
one. That's
and
so
we were
yummy.
going to, but we ran out of time to get the stuff. But the drink that's like an ombre drink, it
Oh,
like
yeah.
cool one
Yeah.
too. So we've done, yeah. So those definitely make things stand out. The food, that's why people have to get your cookbook.
Yeah. Oh, well, you're you're awful sweet with that. But I totally agree with you. And when I look back at my childhood, the things that were very powerful and impactful to me and my fondest memories, they were all outside. They were all
Yeah.
outside. I mean, I have some good memories of being inside or certain things that happened at school or whatever. But for the most part, it was when we went camping, when we did things, when I was outside with, my mom picking strawberries. Those are the things. And they were so simple and so cheap and didn't
Mhm.
cost a lot of money. And there wasn't a lot
Yeah.
of hubbub around it. It was simple and it was impactful and it, lasts with you for your whole life. And so that's so, so important. So, okay, I love your book. I'm going to show it again here. Until the streetlights come on. At the end of your book, you wrote, "Today is the day when you get to choose how you want your family to be." Will you expand on that for us?
Mhm. Here's what I think. I think that for too long, we have sacrificed today for the sake of tomorrow. And that's where I think we've gone wrong. And we've sacrificed today, maybe even unintentionally or well intentioned, that we say, look, I want my kid to be ready for the SAT. I want my kid to be ready for this college thing. I want them to be ready for what's next. And so what we've done is we have sucked the joy out of today. We have filled it with so much schoolwork and so much sitting and so little of the things in life that bring everyone joy. Like, no one likes to sit and listen to a lecture. No, I mean, unless it's a topic you're super interested in,
Mm-mm.
but that's like not really what school is, right? This is like what other people have prescribed for you to learn. And occasionally, I think there are times when we're really engaged and we love that. But for the most part, we have, I think, reduced childhood to this like one dimensional thing, which is like academics and standardized tests. And we do it because we're hoping, the hope is that it prepares them for tomorrow. But the issue is that our world is changing too fast for that approach anymore. It used to
Mhm.
be that people would have a job for 30 years. And so we knew how to prepare them. We could say, this is the path so that you can get a job out of college at age 22 and keep that job until you're 52 and then retire. But the
Mhm.
problem now is that these kids are having 4 different jobs in the first decade out of college or high school, like the first 10 years of adulthood. The average is 4 different jobs. Well, that means that some kids are having way more. Maybe
Yeah.
they're going to have 6 jobs. Maybe they're going to have 8 jobs. They're going to have jobs that we have never heard of. We don't
Mhm.
even know what they are. Well, how do you prepare your kids for the unknown? It is not by giving them a one-dimensional childhood. It is
Mhm.
by giving them a full, like a vibrantly full childhood. so that they have all of these other facets of their being, so that they have these good social skills, so that their brains are very quick, so that they're adaptable, so that they're resilient, they've got grit, they can deal with adversity, they can deal in these different environments, and they have this, when those three things, they've had autonomy, they feel competent, they know how to relate with others, and that is what sets them up for tomorrow. And so I think that we do have the choice, and every family is different. So every family has a different amount of time where they
Mhm.
get to choose, what am I going to do with that time? But that is the choice that we do have. And I think that if we look at it, that time that we have, as more of, if I am vibrantly living today, that is what sets my kids up for tomorrow. And
Mhm.
that's really all they need. All we have to do is set them up for tomorrow, and then tomorrow takes care of itself. And if you live in that way, and that's really how I live. Like you and
Mhm.
I were talking, Lana, about, how do you juggle, and how do you, and people ask a lot, like, I remember I remember having this interview. Like, I had gotten a book offer. It ended up getting canceled, like, way later. That's a different story. But I got a book offer, and then after I got the offer, it was like they came back and I like had to interview. I was like, wait,
Wait, this
I
doesn't make
was
sense.
confused. Right. They had an interview, and I was sitting on this call, and it was a couple years ago, and they were like, it was 2019. So my kids are still little. I mean, I've got an 11-year-old and under. And they're like, well, what's your 5-year plan? And I was like, I don't know. I only know what I'm going to do today.
I'm keeping
And
them alive. That's what I'm
yes,
doing.
I have a commitment to a full and vibrant today, because, and
Mhm.
that it has worked. It has
Yes.
worked, Lana. Like, our kids are thriving, our business is thriving. I don't
Mhm.
know. And we
Yeah.
homeschool 5 kids the same as you. It's like, you're busy. We got all these things
Right.
going on. So I say, I'm going to come today and to do with it what I can, to try and I like, well, I keep going back to this book because I liked it so much. I just read it, Indistractable, where it says you got to, make sure that your health is stable, and then you're connecting with your family, and that work is the last thing. And so,
Mhm.
trying to keep, it's not even balance as much maybe as it is priorities.
Yes.
That is the thing that I'm striving for, is to say, look, what's most important is that I spend time with my kids, and we play some cards, and we do some sewing together, and we meet up with some friends at a park, and I go see my parents, and we celebrate someone's birthday. Like, that's it. And so if what happens is that the work suffers, that my podcast goes out, I mean, my podcast is all over the place. I
Yeah.
don't know. Sometimes
Yeah.
there's one and sometimes there's five, and I don't know. And
Mhm.
what they say is the most important thing for a successful podcast is that you're consistent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, whoops,
Right.
what? Oh well. And I think you just have to trust that each day has enough trouble of its own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our days are numbered. And so living in a way that brings your family a lot of joy and togetherness doesn't shortchange your kids.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
mean they're not going to be prepared for tomorrow. And what a message of hope, I think. The message is that we can do less and gain more.
Yes, yes. And it is a message of hope. It's inspiration that we can follow this path that you've laid out, that really was the path, the normal path for us as growing up. That's how
Right.
I grew up, is we just ran around,
Right.
and exactly your title of your book, when the street lights came
Mhm.
on, I better have my rear end home,
Yeah.
and that's what we knew. And so I just love your message. So before, I know we're running short on time here, before I let you go, kind of off topic here, speak to the mom that has her kids in public school and she's working, or the single mom. What I love about your mission and the stuff that you put out there, it's not just for homeschool families. It is
Right.
not just cookie cutter, this certain kind of lifestyle. I
Mhm.
love how you mentioned no one is a loser here. If you
Right.
add any amount of
Right.
hours, we're all winners here. So,
Right.
so speak to that for a minute to someone that might live in an apartment downtown, and they're a single mom and they have a
Mhm.
couple of kids, and it's like chaos because she's
Yeah.
she's doing it all by herself. They don't live close to a lot of nature. So speak
Mhm.
to that person really quick before I let you go.
Sure. Okay, let me hand you some hope, because that's what this is. This is not a message of dumping one more thing on your shoulder. This is a message of that what the kid brings to the table is a worthy thing. And so the pressure is off quite a bit. So what's really neat is that there are people around the world in all situations of life that are doing the 1,000 hours outside journey, and they join in all sorts of different capacities. In fact, a lot of people adjust the goal. So we've got this sheet that we put on the fridge. It's got 1,000 spaces. And if you counted each space as a half hour, well, that's 500 hours. So if you count each
Mm,
space as 15 minutes, right, you can still use that sheet in certain increments. It doesn't really work in some other ways, but you can adjust it to a degree. But the message is that whatever you can do to get your family outside. So that might be on the way home from school, we're going to stay at the playground for a little bit longer. I'm going to
mhm,
bring a snack when I come pick you up, and we're just going to stick around for 30 or 45 minutes. And while you play, I'm going to sit and read a book, and I'm going to
mhm,
get what I need while you're getting what you need. Or on a weekend, we're going to go to the apple orchard. And instead of just going for 45 minutes to pick the apples, maybe we're going to stay for 2 hours or 3 hours and walk around and see what else there is to do. Because what's happening in those moments is that everyone is getting what they need, and it's helping in the long term. I think the issue about where you live is an interesting one because it gets brought up a lot. The city gets brought up a lot. But
mhm,
what's interesting is that no matter where you live, uh, there's this book called How to Raise a Wild Child by Dr. Scott Sampson, I think is his name, and he says nature is everywhere. It's coming
mhm,
up in the cracks in the sidewalk. And I remember during COVID, we had a period of time where our kids are like all in orthodontics, you know. This is
mhm.
great. All right, this is like the stage of life we're in that nobody really told me was coming. But they're all in orthodontics, and for a period of time, no one else could go in to the office except for the patient. And so we had to sit outside. And I remember we're sitting in a parking lot and there were ants and they were carrying little bits of crackers from one thing to the next. And that's what we did. There's bees buzzing
Yes.
around in the lavender. And so I think what's interesting is that no matter where you live, there are pros and cons to your environment. So if you're in a city, you have the opportunity to walk to a different
Mm,
place, a bunch of different places. My brother lives in Brooklyn and we have gone to visit, and there's so many little playgrounds that you can
mhm,
walk to and take your kids to. Where I live, there's not a playground that I can walk to. So if you're in the city, you have to embrace what's in the city. There are trees,
mhm,
there are birds, there are wildflowers or weeds or dandelions coming up between the cracks in the sidewalk. There's ant
mhm,
hills. There's little playgrounds that you could walk to. If you live in a suburb, if you live in a neighborhood, you've got neighborhood kids. So you may not have a big, expansive yard. You may not be able to walk to your restaurant, but you've got maybe neighborhood kids that you could play with. And there's a really fantastic book called Playborhood where the author talks about, like, let's get some stuff out in the front yards. Like, let's put
mm,
our really fun things out in the front yards and really entice all the neighbor kids outside. So,
mhm,
but maybe you don't have a farm. You're not going to have
mhm,
goat. And then if you live
mhm,
in the country, then you can have goats. Maybe you have a horse. Maybe you have a little bit more land, but you don't have neighbors to play with and you can't walk to
mhm,
the restaurant. So, no matter where you live, you're going to have to embrace what's available for you there, and to take the message that this isn't an extra thing to add on. It really
mhm,
is um, an opportunity to step into a life that's a little bit more fulfilling, that still prepares kids in an exceptional way for the future that lies ahead of them.
mhm. That's so good. And raising happy, healthy children. I mean, that's all of our goal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Regardless of where we live and regardless of the temperatures we live in. And I know we've spoke
Sure.
about that before, that, these things can be done. Put a coat on. We have to get out of our comfort zone and, you enjoy it. So just
Yeah.
such a good message. I am so glad you came on today. I always love chatting with
Thanks,
you.
Lana.
Tell our friends, because you have an absolutely amazing podcast. You have books coming out, another book coming out. What is your favorite social media? If someone is new and wants to go follow you, what's your favorite place
That's
right now?
Instagram. What's yours? Is yours
Okay,
TikTok?
well, I don't want to like TikTok. I'm on TikTok. I have a bigger following on TikTok, but I like Instagram. I like them both. I try.
Yeah, they're fun.
I want to get off TikTok, but it's hard. It's so dang funny.
It is.
As we're
It's
talking about
fun.
screen time, it's a
Well,
waste of time. It is
but
a
you know
waste
what
of
though?
time.
Well, here's the thing. This is, well, I'm gonna go back to this book because I just read it. The Indestructible book, he says it's not a waste of time if you're planning on wasting time.
Yes. Oh, that's
Like, he
good.
says, like, look, you know what? If you want to set aside 20 minutes a day to scroll through a feed and laugh, actually,
Yeah.
like, laughter is so good for your health. If it's
Yeah.
funny, if you're entertained, if you learn
Their
something
goat
new,
videos on there are like nothing else. You can't find these funny goats on Instagram. They are the funniest. So that's good
well,
though.
there
I
you
like that.
go.
Just, controlling the time. I think
Yeah.
that's very, very wise. So, okay, your book, I'm going to show it one more time here if you're watching on YouTube, and it is called Until the Streetlights Come On. Comes out mid-November.
hmm
Tell our friends here online where they can find this beautiful thing.
Okay, so I hope it's going to be where you buy your books. You
Yeah,
never know.
right.
But the special thing is that if you buy it from the publisher, which I know takes a few more clicks, then you got to have your credit card ready to fill in the information, so it's a little bit more cumbersome. But it's 30% off plus free shipping from the publisher,
Oh,
which is a pretty
wow.
good deal. 30%
Okay,
off.
now
So
who
that's
is your
Baker Books.
publisher? Who is your
You're like, wait a
publisher?
minute. Baker Books. So it's
Oh,
bakerbooks.com, and they offer that, I think, in perpetuity. I'm not I'm not totally positive,
nice.
but at least
Yeah,
for the beginning period. So like if you're looking for a gift, I'm always looking for gifts that are like 15 bucks. If
right,
you're looking
right.
for a gift, because it comes out in November, that might be a cool way to go because it's the 30% off plus there's free shipping.
And what a great, like I said, a great Christmas gift. I already have a few people that I know that I'm going to buy this for. It's just wonderful. Well, Jenny, thank you for coming on. I always love chatting with you. It's so much fun. And we're just excited for your book to come out and all the things you're doing. So I'm glad you came on.
Thanks, Lana. I'm so glad that we've connected. Thanks to everyone who listened in. And until next time, because I'm sure
Until
there
next
will be
time, we'll
one.
do this again. Yes.